protected and they can bank as normal. Customers should not notice any changes, whilst the wider UK banking system remains safe, sound and well capitalised. Using stabilisation powers granted by the Banking Act 2009, which afforded us the ability to safely manage the failure of banks, we have forestalled disruption in the tech sector and supported confidence in the UK financial system. The resolution action was taken by the Bank of England in consultation with Treasury, using its powers to transfer the UK business of SVB to a private sector purchaser. As required by the Act, the Bank of England consulted the Treasury, the Prudential Regulation Authority and the Financial Conduct Authority on its assessment that all required conditions for this transaction had been met. We've been able to achieve this outcome, the best possible outcome, in short order, without any taxpayer money or government guarantees. There has been no bailout, and the actions taken are a win for customers, taxpayers and the banking system. The transfer of SVB UK to a buyer has allowed the Treasury to limit the risk to public funds by ensuring that shareholders and creditors, rather than depositors, bear losses. To help achieve this result, the Bank of England has made a related instrument bringing about a mandatory reduction of capital instruments in SVB UK, restoring it to viability. It is my view, Mr. Speaker, that in this situation the system worked as we would hope. In order to ensure the sale could proceed, the government is using its powers under the Banking Act to provide HSBC with an exemption to certain ring-fencing requirements. This was crucial to ensuring that a successful transaction could be executed, that the bank has the liquidity it needs, and that deposits and public funds are protected. The outcome will provide security for some of the UK's most innovative, fast-growing firms. The UK's tech and life sciences sectors are world-leading. Hundreds of thousands of people are employed in them, and they make a very substantial contribution to the economy as a whole. My friends, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have been clear throughout. We will look after our high-tech sectors, and that is what we have done. The Bank of England has confirmed that as a result of the swift, decisive action we have taken, depositors will be able to access their accounts. It's worth reiterating that, as the Governor has said, the wider UK banking system remains safe, sound and well capitalised. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in concluding, I would like to place on record my sincere thanks to my fellow ministers across Whitehall, to officials at the Treasury and regulators who worked tirelessly through the weekend to grip this situation, to deliver this solution and to prevent real jeopardy to hundreds of the UK's most innovative companies.
Shadow Minister Chulit Sadiq.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for giving me advance sight of his statement today. Labour welcomes the announcement made by HSBC that it will be buying the UK arm of Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB UK, in a rescue deal. As the Shadow Chancellor said over the weekend, the UK life sciences and tech sector play an indispensable role in driving growth and innovation across the economy. Now that those who bank with SVB UK have some certainty, the government should examine how we got here in the first place. For example, when SVB UK was granted a separate banking licence last year, what assessment did the Treasury and Bank of England make of the significant liquidity risks arising from its deposit base being a small number of high-value corporate deposits? The effects of the collapse of SVB are still being felt across the UK market, and the Minister said in his statement that HSBC's purchase of SVB has supported confidence in the UK financial system. But what assessment has he made of the fact that London's FTSE 100 was down today, while the UK bank index fell by almost 5% this morning and by more than 10% over the weekend? What will the disruptions in the banking sector mean for confidence and the wider economy and the ability of high-growth companies to access the credit that they need to thrive? The Minister also said that disruption in the tech sector has been forestalled, but what reassurance can the Minister provide today that under HSBC's ownership, the bank will continue to be able to support early-stage tech and life sciences businesses in the UK? And the Minister also said HSBC has been given an exemption to certain ring-fence requirements. Could I ask the Minister, will this be a permanent exemption? Perhaps the most important question, I'm sure the Minister will agree with me, is how can we avoid this happening again? With inflation at record levels, the Bank of England has had to take steps to tackling rising prices, but ministers must make an assessment of the risks that sharp changes to UK interest rates might pose to our financial system. It's time for the government to launch a systemic review of the risks that sharply rising interest rates pose to the UK financial sector, and I hope the Chancellor will return to the House having made that assessment. Finally, the events of this weekend further underline the importance of ensuring that UK startups have access to the patient capital they need to grow, as proposed by the Labour Party's Startup Review. I hope the Minister will return to the House soon to update on both the broader assessment of the risks to the financial sector arising from sharply increasing rates, and with a plan to address the longer-term problems holding back growth and the provision of patient capital to our growing businesses.
Well said.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for Hampstead and Kilburn. I think concealed within that was a grudging support, and I'm sure the honourable lady would like to add her voice to so many in the sector who have welcomed this today, providing the important confidence and stability that is needed. She raised the point about the fact that SVB UK has a separate banking licence. It's precisely because of that mechanism that our regulators and the Treasury have been able to take the action that we've taken over the weekend. I think the honourable lady understands the disruption and volatility in the sector, but she should also be reassured that the Bank of England Governor has confirmed that this is not indicative of systemic risk. I can confirm that the ring fencing in order that the Silicon Valley Bank, now within HSBC, is able to provide the broad range of services that our life sciences and tech sector value so much, that the exemption from the ring fencing requirements will be permanent. In terms of her question about a systemic review, of course, always these are opportunities for us to learn and look again. But as I said in my opening remarks, the system has worked, Mr. Speaker, as it was intended. Finally, with the greatest respect, this side of the House needs no lessons on patient capital. We are unlocking capital for our important tech and life sciences. Only last week, my honourable friend, the Minister for Pensions, brought to this House the regulations that will remove the charge cap and allow our pension funds to invest in some of the fastest growing sectors of our economy.
Chair of the Select Committee, Harriet Baldwin.
Mr. Speaker, and can I put on record my gratitude to the Minister, to his colleagues, to his officials, to people at the bank and to the City in general, who obviously worked flat out all weekend to deliver what turns out to be, I think, the best possible outcome in these very difficult circumstances. And can I ask the Minister, in terms of the importance of this sector to the UK economy, did he and the bank treat this situation any differently because of the sector in which it was operating, or would they have tried for the same sort of resolution and solution for a bank in any sector? Secondly, was he concerned, as I was, to read reports that actually investors in these businesses were requiring the funds that the firms that they were funding to put money into this bank as a condition for investing in them? Does that concern him in any way? And finally, given that in the US Other banks have also collapsed, some other small banks, including one that's specialised in crypto. Does he think that in any way crypto is contributing to financial instability?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady, my predecessor and chairman of the Select Committee, both for her support and for her comments. The degree of concentration of a particular sector is unusual. It was an unusual feature. The business model of Silicon Valley Bank in the UK was different to that from the US, partly because of the tight regulations that we have here, and for that reason I've not seen any evidence to believe that crypto assets, banking of crypto asset companies was something that contributed. Rather, we saw the impact once the Fed had taken its action. We saw the impact of the bank here, and that is why it was right for the bank to act, to give us the space to protect that bank and to achieve the outcome that we did and that we have announced this morning.
SNP spokesperson Stuart Hosey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the key lessons of the 2008-9 financial crash was that conduct of business issues and liquidity issues could very, very quickly morph into systemic risk contagion across a variety of transmission channels. So I very much welcome the speedy way in which SVB UK was resolved over the weekend. However, their business model, and they're not alone, involved the bank holding a large number of very low interest-bearing bonds at a time of rising bond yields. They were required to sell those at a loss, which exacerbated the liquidity problems they have. So would it not be prudent now to ensure our regulators have another look at the UK banks to ensure comparable low interest-bearing assets are stringently priced, marked to market, to make sure that the capital requirements, the Tier 1 capital, is just that, and it's of sufficient quantity and quality to ensure any liquidity problem does not morph into an insolvency and systemic risk problem.
Thank you very much. I thank the member for Dundee East for his recognition about the speed and decisiveness with which the whole government has come together, worked together and acted to deliver this outcome. That's kind of him and appreciated. There was a question as well, and if I may, we should not conflate some of what we read about the balance sheet in the US with the regulated balance sheet in the UK. This was a separately regulated balance sheet, and again, the business model in the UK and the backing and the interest bonds, the bonds and collateral that was being held, I'm not aware that the forced sale of that and losses on that was a contributory factor. The reality is that we saw a withdrawal of deposits, and it was that, with the fact that the bank had the ability, because of the relatively ring-fenced balance sheet that it had, to protect the bank and take the action we needed. Had the bank not done so, then we could have been in a very different situation. So we were right to act as we did.
Chair of the Science Committee, Greg Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Can I strongly welcome the decisive intervention that has been described that has saved many UK tech businesses and jobs. And would my honourable friend take the opportunity to consider how the responsiveness of UK regulation that has been demonstrated overnight, combined with the strength of the City of London and our tech sector, provides an opportunity to attract more businesses to do their financing within the UK and not need to go overseas to get the financing that they're required to start up and grow.
My right honourable friend, who does such good work for the Science and Technology Committee, for community through his committee, is absolutely right. What the technology and life sciences want, our government to be joined up, to be decisive, to remove unnecessary regulations while still operating in a high-quality regulated environment. We have the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to now go a lot further forward, to deliver the Edinburgh reforms, to combine our aspirations to be a science superpower with the ferocious financing strength that we have here in the United Kingdom.
Angela Edel.
Mr. Speaker, I commend the quick and effective action, but the collapse of SVB Bank in America was partially due to the liquidity issues, but also there's an issue of the changes that were made to the threshold at which banks are considered systemically risky, which went from $50 billion up to $250 billion. That meant that there was an issue with SVB that it could continue in America without having the very focused regulation which might have spotted this problem earlier. Does the Minister think that the Edinburgh reforms offer any similar risks? And will he say a little bit about the exemption from ring fencing which he announced today for HSBC, and whether he's content that that doesn't offer any risks either?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must be very careful, Mr. Speaker, not to comment on the matters as it relates to the United States. This was a separate bank. It was regulated here, and it's as a result of the regulation and the fact we've taken back control of our financial regulatory rulebook that we were able to act so decisively. So forgive the Honourable Lady if I don't talk about matters in the United States. In respect of ring fencing, it was the view of the Bank of England and the Treasury in the circumstances and to protect public funds that to provide a permanent exemption for what is a very small part of a much larger HSBC. I think less than 1% of its pro forma clients on an enlarged basis will be the former clients of the Silicon Valley Bank, that was an appropriate decision to make. I don't think it puts inappropriate levels of risk in the system. And by streamlining the rulebook, by bringing back control and dispensing that to UK regulators under the accountability to Parliament, and the Honourable Lady will know that through her membership of the Select Committee, I think we can have better regulation and deliver better outcomes for the sector.
Dame Andrea Lent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations to my honourable friend and to all who were involved in this rescue. It was absolutely vital that we urgently acted to protect the fear and the risk of contagion that was very apparent over the weekend. But could my honourable friend comment on whether the fact that SVB UK was a separately ring-fenced bank and that ring-fencing is a UK-specific regulation, does he feel that that brought to bear any protection for SVB UK? He will recall only too well, as I do, that Lehman's sucked capital out of the UK when they were in dire straits. That, to a large extent, caused that ultimate contagion. Is ring-fencing going to continue to protect UK banking sector as we go forward and even through the Edinburgh reforms?
My right honourable friend speaks with great authority on these matters. I can give her that assurance. This was constituted as a subsidiary in the UK. It had its own separate balance sheet. It was regulated as such, and it was because of that fact that the bank was able to make the decisive intervention that it did, whilst there were assets within that subsidiary, that we were ultimately able to restore viability by successfully finding over the weekend a bank to step in and buy, a very large bank, Europe's largest bank, to put its balance sheet behind this entity.
Mr McGovern.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And whilst we're all full of admiration, particularly for all of those of our officials who worked through the weekend to make this happen, I'm afraid I find the statement a bit long on self-congratulation and a bit short on explanation. What questions has the Minister asked as to why this happened? Why were all these companies banking with this particular bank? What cultural aspects were there to this case? What do we need to uncover that will be important for the sustainability of both banking and technological firms in the future?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's not uncommon for banks to have a particular specialism. The members opposite have worked to help bring forward regulations that will help us have more credit unions, which tend to have a geographic concentration. There are agricultural banks and there are other wholesale banks. So it's not of itself an unusual feature. In this case, we were able to take action precisely because of the UK regulatory structures, the interventions that we make. We'll learn any lessons going forward, but this is a government that is on the side of technology companies and life sciences and has been proud to deliver this outcome, this important certainty, and remove the jeopardy that they otherwise faced at Open of Business this morning.
Sir Desmond Swayne.
Estimate had the Bank of England made of the health of SVB before the events of the weekend?
It wouldn't be right for me to answer on behalf of the Bank of England. We have, I forgive the honourable gentleman, but we have an independent regulator who looks at these matters. The Treasury Select Committee regularly takes evidence from the Bank of England, and I'm sure we'll do so in the future.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm sure that many firms across the United Kingdom will welcome and be breathing a sigh of relief at the decision which has been made over the weekend. However, this was done in haste. I asked the Minister what kind of due diligence was done by HSBC when arranging this takeover, and is he sure that we are not walking into the similar situation which you had with Lloyds and HBOS in 2008, where a quick decision led to a domino effect in the banking system, resulting in bailouts by the taxpayer?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can't speak for the due diligence that was done for HSBC. They've got themselves comfortable with that. We should also understand the relative scale of HSBC. HSBC is an extraordinarily well-regulated, it's a global and diverse bank. My understanding is that if you add all of the clients, the important clients that we had in the front of our mind as we sought to act over the weekend, and we make no apologies, if I may, for acting in haste. Haste was the absolute required procedure in this particular case. But if you took the entirety of the clients of Silicon Valley Bank UK, that would be less than 1% of the overall client base of HSBC. And with respect, I don't think that was the case in the examples that the honourable member referred to.
Anthony Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The sighs of relief across South Cambridgeshire this morning were so loud they were almost deafening. Dozens of my technology companies that have been in contact with me over the weekend thought they were going to be wiped out this morning, but can now operate as normal because of the decisive action by the government. And I very much congratulate the Minister and the Bank of England and the Treasury for its action. But I've also had questions about whether this is a sign that all the reforms to the financial system in the wake of the global financial crisis have failed or are failing. And but can my right honourable friend the Minister, does he agree with me that actually this isn't a sign of the reforms failing, it's a sign of them actually working, and without these reforms we wouldn't be able to do the rescue in this way? And secondly, the reforms that are coming through, the Edinburgh reforms, can he confirm they won't make future collapses more likely or future rescues more difficult?
Well, my honourable friend, the member for South Cambridgeshire, knows a great deal about the sector. It is due to past reforms that we were able to take the decisive action. Parliament has given, in extremis, and with the agreement of the Bank of England, the PRA, the FCA and the Treasury, sweeping powers to enable this sort of transaction to happen at great pace. And let me be clear, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is the shareholders and the creditors of the bank, not the depositors or the taxpayer, has lost. And in the system that we have, that is the right outcome, and I'm very pleased that we were able to achieve that outcome. Of course it is the case that the Edinburgh reforms, which are designed to make this country have the ability to continue to grow and be internationally competitive with other markets, whilst adhering to the highest quality regulatory standards, and with the UK at the absolute cornerstone of organisations like that the Financial Stability Board will not put any more jeopardy into the financial system. In fact, having good, healthy businesses that grow and are profitable is the best way to avoid jeopardy.
Paula Barker.
Mr Deputy Speaker, first pension funds and LDIs, now the collapse of SVB UK. Isn't it time for a systematic review of the risks that sharply rising interest rates pose to the UK financial sector?
With the greatest respect to the Honourable Lady, the issue here was a subsidiary of a US bank. I'm not going to be commenting on US policy, on interest rates, or anything else for that matter from this dispatch box. The important fact is that we were able to restore this bank to viability to, over the course of a very small number of hours and days, to find a successful buyer, and we did that because of the strength of the UK regulatory system and because of the conviction of this Prime Minister and this Chancellor that this is an absolutely critical sector and one of the ways that we continue to grow the UK economy.
Danny Kruger.
Indeed, Mr Speaker, and can I also pay tribute to the exemplary orchestration of all the different stakeholders and decision makers that the Minister led over the weekend. I think it's helpful to distinguish between the decisions taken by the American government and by ours in respect to this bank. You know, the American taxpayer is guaranteeing the deposits of SVP account holders there. In our case, another bank has bought them and the taxpayer is safe, and I pay tribute to the government for that. I appreciate he can't comment on American policy, but just in the hypothetical instance of another bank in the UK failing or another sector getting into trouble, can you give an indication of his thinking about whether the taxpayer would ever need to step in, and will he guarantee that in fact that won't happen?
No. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to offer the my honourable friend for devices that guarantee. That wouldn't be prudent and the right thing to do. But what I can guarantee is that this government will do everything possible to reconcile the needs of protecting customers, of protecting financial stability and of protecting the taxpayer. And it is of great note that we were able to do that in this transaction, and all of our energies, if it were ever to unfortunately recur, would be devoted to precisely the same ends.
Sarah Olney.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I very much welcome the purchase of Silicon Valley Bank UK by HSBC this morning, not least because I'm a former employee of a company that had exposure to the bank on both sides of the Atlantic and whose CEO was one of the signatories to the letter sent to the Chancellor on Saturday. Statements made by the UK bank on Thursday and Friday. If depositors had relied on the assertions made in those statements, and if the purchase hadn't gone through this morning, those depositors would have incurred losses. Now, can the Minister confirm, does that constitute a breach of the regulations? And if it does, will there be any sanctions on people identified as having committed those breaches?
Well, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted that the Honourable Member for Richmond's Park constituents do benefit from the certainty. It was a terrible weekend for everybody who was a depositor or who was in some way dependent on SVB UK, and that's why it was so important that we not just achieve this outcome that the regulatory structure and laws laid down by Parliament allowed us to, but that we're able to act decisively. And I welcome the fact that another great British bank, HSBC, has stepped in, and I wish them well and all of the employees. In terms of particular things that were said, it would be inappropriate for me to comment, but fortunately we are in the position that every depositor has been made whole, and then therefore that issue does not arise.
Vicky Ford.
Can I massively congratulate my honourable friend and His Majesty's government on this news? Having spent 3 years of my own life pushing the post-crash bank recovery and resolution frameworks through Europe, I can absolutely confirm that the fact that there are now powers in so many countries to be able to rapidly resolve failing banks without needing taxpayers' money is to a very large part due to the outstanding global leadership of the post-crash Conservative UK government and the actions of the now Governor of the Bank of England at this time. So can he confirm that going forward, the government will ensure that our financial services regulators not only work to reduce systemic risk, but also back our financial services sector in their efforts to invest in our country and help our economy grow.
I can absolutely give my honourable friend for Chelmsford that assurance, and in doing so, let me also pay tribute to her work as a member of the European Parliament between 2009 and 2017 when she led on banking reform.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Minister has talked about the fact that SVB UK was a subsidiary of the American bank, but the fact is that the banking licence here in this country was a separate banking licence given to SVB UK. So could I just push him on this issue of the risk assessment around liquidity? What risk assessment, when that banking licence was given, what risk assessment was conducted, particularly given the concentration of a small number of corporates in terms of the deposits to SVB UK?
That is, with respect, Mr Deputy Speaker, the whole point. It was a separate subsidiary. It did have a separate banking licence here. It did participate in the regulator's stress tests here. There is risk in any financial system. And what this House is focused on and what our diligent regulators are focused on is achieving the right balance of that risk. There will, from time to time, as there were with the failure of the bank in the US, there will be some factors that can lead to challenges in any risk-based system, notwithstanding good work by the regulators and the stress tests having been applied.
Richard Fuller.
Mr Deputy Speaker, can I draw the House's attention to my historical entries in my Register of Interests as an advisor to a technology venture fund and as a board member of a number of portfolio companies, many of which will have had financing arrangements with Silicon Valley Bank, HSBC and other financial institutions. Mr Speaker, on behalf of the technology businesses in Bedfordshire, can I add my thanks to the Minister and his team for their swift response over the weekend. But he will be aware of general concerns about the global liquidity for the technology sector, and I'd be interested about his assessment about how the SVB experience at home and abroad may exacerbate that and the resilience of the UK tech sector. And although, Mr Deputy Speaker, HSBC is a great bank, and indeed I am a customer of HSBC, Silicon Valley Bank succeeded over many years precisely because it was so closely attenuated to the needs of early stage and growth stage businesses. So will my honourable friend consider what steps he can take to encourage the emergence of new challenger banks to repeat the successes and avoid the failures of SVB in the UK?
Thank my friend, for the honourable member for North East Bedfordshire. As he knows, the government is seeking to support challenger banks to make sure that we have a vibrant and competitive sector. That includes looking at issues like the level of MREL, making sure that we have proportionate banking regulation that is relevant to the risk involved. He makes important points about the culture and capabilities of SVB UK, which is why it is so important that we had to very swiftly find them a home. I have spoken today to the Chief Executive of HSBC as well as the former Chief Executive of SVB UK. They are both enormously excited about the future. They see this as a platform for mutual growth, for taking our brilliant life sciences and technology businesses international or to a new scale. And this government will not rest until we have mobilised capital to turn us into that science superpower.
Shomora.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the system worked, the Minister says, and certainly it was a huge relief that the estimated 50% of the UK tech sector, which banked with with SVB UK, could today play its suppliers and its staff. But surely that highlights the lack of diversity of the capital available to the UK tech sector and our dependence on the US. So in Silicon Valley banks, in the last 2 years, their deposits went up by 3 times, but their exposure to treasuries and therefore to interest rate rises went up 9-fold. Is the Minister seriously saying that no one this side of the Atlantic should have noticed that and that it had no impact on what happened?
Yeah.
The honourable member for Newcastle talks about dependence on the US. If that's her concern, then she should welcome this deal wholeheartedly, because we've taken a former subsidiary of a US business that's now part of a thriving and successful UK business.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I draw attention to my entry in the Register. Bravo to the Minister, and bravo in particular to the resolutions team at the Bank of England, who've been honing their skills for many years and finally got the chance to put them into use. But further to the question from my constituency neighbour, the Honourable Member for Devizes, does the Minister understand the relief felt by many that the taxpayer was not asked to once again step in and effectively nationalise private sector losses? And does he agree that for a capitalist economy to function, even in the most painful of circumstances, it has to be allowed to do what it does best, which is to recycle distressed assets?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, the Right Honourable Member for North West Hampshire. Look, he's quite right when he talks about risk and the proficiency of capital systems of recycling capital to productive uses. It is also an enormous focus of this government, and it's why our #1 priority was to seek to make a private sector transfer of the bank, in this case if we could, to protect the taxpayer whilst also protecting customers and the solvency of the financial system. I'm glad we were able to achieve this output, and the reason that we will continue to do so is by having fit-for-purpose regulations in this space.
I'm Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Does the Minister agree that the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank highlights the dangers associated with deregulation within the banking sector, something that the UK government has continually touted as one of the benefits of Brexit?
Hear, hear.
Yeah. No, I don't accept that for 1 minute, Mr Deputy Speaker, because we're only just bringing forward the deregulation. The Financial Services and Markets Bill is not even on the statute book, and the pertinent regulation is precisely that affected this situation is precisely the same regulations that we've inherited from Brussels.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's at times when we act in haste where we need to think about the long-term consequences of the regulatory actions taken. And I join others in the House in commending the Treasury and the wider government and the Bank of England. In relation to ring fencing in particular, the Minister said that HSBC has been given a waiver on certain ring fencing rules. I say this as somebody who, before I got to this House, worked at HSBC in detail on ring fencing and many other things. So would the Minister explain more details in relation to that waiver, and more importantly, whether that waiver on ring fencing will apply more widely to other banks caught by ring fencing regulations as well?
I thank the Honourable Member for Hitchin and Harpenden for his question. The government is, as he well knows, undertaking a review of ring fencing. There's an expressions of a call for evidence, expressions of interest into how we could reform that, following the work done by Sir Keith Skeoch as to how we mesh the ring fencing arrangements put in place back in 2008 with the more modern resolution arrangements. Of course, we'll learn what lessons we can from this. But as I said at the beginning, Mr Deputy Speaker, in this case, we've been able to achieve an outcome that has protected customers, protected the taxpayer, and protected the financial system.
Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I too had many representations over the weekend from early stage tech companies in and around Cambridge, and they will be much relieved by the news today. But to echo the point made by the Honourable Member for North East Bedfordshire, the reason they banked with SVB was that close understanding of their particular needs. So what guarantee can we have that HSBC will be able to replicate that?
Well, how they run this bank going forward is a matter for HSBC. However, it's a prodigiously successful global institution. It's bought this on the back of a desire to grow and to support sectors that it sees that this government is firmly on the side of. We see the aspiration, we see the opportunity now that we've taken back control from Brussels, and we're going to make an enormous success out of our tech and life sciences sector. We are on their side.
Andrew Jones.
Mr Deputy Speaker, can I welcome my honourable friend's statement and congratulate him on all those who've worked to resolve this matter so quickly. the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank will have left its customers worried about managing their cash flows, and it's obviously cash flow problems which cause the majority of businesses to fail. In his statement, he mentioned that customers would continue to have access to their deposits. Can you just comment, is that seamless? Is that going to continue right away so that business continuity is safeguarded?
I thank the Honourable Member for Harrogate and Knaresborough, and again to pay tribute to the hard-working officials from Treasury, regulators and my colleagues across government who pulled together rapidly to deliver this solution. It is the case, and there may be teething issues as the integration takes place, but it is the case, having spoken to both HSBC and to the management of SVB UK, that they are open for business today, they are serving their clients, and that is the outcome all along that the Prime Minister and Chancellor were absolutely right that we sought in time for this morning's opening of business.
Daisy Cooper.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I'd like to press the Minister on his answer to my honourable friend from Richmond Park. At least 2 tech companies in my constituency were almost affected, and I'm grateful to the Economic Secretary for acknowledging my urgent letters over the weekend. But one of these companies in St Albans moved £200,000 from their US account to their UK account, in part based on the statements made about SVB being an independent entity regulated in the UK, statements that bank made to try and give them the assurance that it wouldn't be affected. It then did become affected. So could I ask the Minister, can he clarify whether SVB would or should have known that this statement was either incorrect or misleading? If he's not prepared to comment on this particular example, will he commit to setting up a process to look into this issue? And does he believe there should be consequences for banks in future that make these incorrect and misleading statements that put companies at risk?
Well, as I said to her neighbour, the Honourable Member for Richmond Park, I don't think it's appropriate with respect that I make comments from the dispatch box about the veracity or otherwise of statements of an individual. I hope she will respect that. It is, of course, right that anyone in a position of leadership in business takes responsibility and acts in good faith. The important point for her constituents, although there may well be lessons to be learnt in time, is that her constituents and their companies are able to operate, have access to their deposits and continue to do their work of growing really important sectors of the economy. I hope the whole House can welcome that.
Richard Graham.
Mr Deputy Speaker, congratulations to the Chancellor, Minister and all involved in resolving this problem, which tech companies in Gloucester and Gloucestershire will greatly appreciate. Does the Minister agree that this shows the importance of having Europe's largest bank, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, regulated and headquartered here in London, that it also shows this government will always support business? And lastly, since the Chancellor extended start-up loans in September, can my honourable friend confirm that effectively this government has helped create and sustain 33,000 new businesses?
Excellent question. Well, my right honourable friend for Gloucester is absolutely right. And what this has demonstrated is that we are on the side of business. We mean it when we say that we want to make the UK the best place to start, to grow and to run a business, and so that would also add to list a business, because he's quite right that HSBC is an enormously successful global business headquartered in the UK and proudly listed on the UK Stock Exchange.
Neil Griffith.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, in the light of recent events and the risk of contagion, can the Minister actually spell out exactly what actions he's taking to ensure that we do not see a contraction in the availability of credit to these specialist, fast-growing companies? And what more will he do to facilitate access to appropriate credit to help our groundbreaking tech industries to develop?
It's a core focus of this side of the House to make sure that our scaling up businesses get access not just to credit, but also to capital at every level through their life. That's why the Prime Minister has made that a core priority. It's why we're bringing forward many of our reforms which will open up capital markets to growing businesses. And it's why we'll continue to look at reforming packets of trapped capital, whether that be in insurers through the reform of Solvency II, or whether looking again at the pension arrangements to make sure that savers and potential pensioners in the future can benefit from the wonderful opportunities from the emerging businesses in the tech and life sciences sector.
Matt Warman.
Deputy Speaker. Had SVB UK not been bought, then it would have had a huge impact on the jobs that are most high-tech in our economy, and indeed on the jobs of the future. So I pay tribute to the Minister and the whole Government and the Bank of England for the work they did over the weekend, and thank him for engaging with me. But does he agree with me that because of that outsized impact that the failure of SVB might have had, it is all the more important that the Government looks at what it was that made SVB so appealing to these vital jobs, how we do more of it where it is right, and how we do less of it if it is dangerous?
I completely agree with my honourable friend. He knows a great deal about this subject. It reflects his own background, and he's absolutely right.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for the statement, and the speed by which government has acted quickly is to be commended, and it is indeed good news. Whilst I welcome very much the purchase of the SVB by HSBC, which looks set to protect the UK investors and the start-ups alike, what further assurances can the Minister give this House that the 3,500 British customers receive in terms of their long-term plan, and how long is the government commitment to steady the ship?
Well, this government is always committed to steady the ship. It's why we take a prudent approach to running the economy. It's why the Prime Minister's priorities are to reduce inflation, to pay down debt, and to grow. And to grow requires the capital, which is why we have a long-term commitment to good regulation, which will minimise the prospects of events like this happening again. But it's also why, and you can see the expertise on this side of the House, that we are so focused on making sure that we have the right ecosystem to allow our brilliant entrepreneurs, our scientists, our innovators to have the fertile capital in which to grow to their potential.
Final question, Louis French.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And for transparency, I draw members' attention to my former career in the City as per my register of interests. And I welcome the swift and decisive action by His Majesty's Government in solving this issue, but also reducing the contagion risks to the wider economy that could have taken place. However, can my honourable friend ensure sufficient regulatory work is taking place to stress test both the liquidity of UK banks and also the government bond markets, given the clear risks highlighted in this case, but also in the leverage in the recent LDI cases?
Yes, I can give the House, as well as my honourable friend for Old Bexley and Sidcup, that commitment. We will learn lessons if there are lessons that need to be learned, but we should not look past the fact that, Mr Deputy Speaker, today we have protected customers. We have protected the taxpayer. We've protected the security of the financial system. That is so important to our businesses. Many, many people will go home from work today much more confident with the jeopardy of the weekend having been removed as a result of the decisive action that this government has taken.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his statement today and for responding to questions for over 3/4 of an hour. Thank you. Just pause for the choreography.
I'll do it with a 12.
The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Illegal migration